Have you ever felt the crushing weight of humiliation so profound that it seemed to redefine your very existence? Those moments when shame burns through your chest, when the laughter of others carves permanent scars into your soul. Today's story plunges deep into those waters of pain, following a young boy whose tattered dignity hangs by threads as fragile as his oversized coat. Yet within this tale of heartbreak lies a powerful message about the transformative nature of forgiveness and the unexpected ways grace appears in our darkest moments. Mason clutched the frayed edges of his oversized grey blazer, fingers tracing the coffee stain near the left pocket. The jacket, 3 sizes too large, had been his most precious find in the community donation bin 7 weeks ago. To everyone else, it was a discarded item with burn marks on the sleeve and missing buttons. To 12-year-old Mason, it was his dignity coat, the one possession that made him feel less like a street kid and more like someone who mattered. "Hey, look at that kid!" A voice sliced through the crisp autumn air as Mason shuffled down the park's cobblestone path. The voice belonged to Brittany Coleman, whose blonde hair caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the maple trees. At 16, she commanded attention among her peers at Westlake High, especially from her 2 constant companions, Zoe and Vanessa. Mason kept his eyes fixed on his worn-out boots, the left sole flapping slightly with each step. 312 days had passed since his mother's funeral. 312 days of foster care, then running away, then surviving however he could. The social workers were still looking for him, but Mason had become adept at invisibility. "Is he wearing a blazer with those jeans?" Zoe's laughter echoed across the park. Her checkered shirt and black vest were carefully selected to project a studied casualness that had actually required 40 minutes before her bedroom mirror that morning. "It looks like he pulled it from a dumpster." Mason's ears burned. The jacket had indeed come from a donation bin, but he'd spent 3 hours carefully washing it in a public bathroom sink, drying it under the hand dryer in 7-minute increments until a security guard had chased him away. The remaining stains had resisted his best efforts with the sliver of soap he'd managed to save. "His face is literally covered in dirt," Vanessa added, her voice carrying the particular cruelty of those who have never known true hardship. "Do you think he's playing dress-up as a businessman?" A small crowd of other teenagers had begun to gather, drawn by the prospect of entertainment at someone else's expense. Mason felt his chest tighten, the familiar sensation of being cornered. In the foster homes, in the shelters, on the streets, there was always someone ready to remind him that he was worth less than nothing. "Hey, dirt boy!" Brittany called out, her voice amplified by newfound audience. "Where'd you get that amazing designer jacket, Garbage Couture's fall collection?" The laughter that followed drove Mason to halt his retreat. Something inside him, some tiny ember of defiance that had survived these past 312 days, flickered to life. He turned slowly, facing his tormentors with quiet dignity despite the smudges on his face and the dirt embedded under his fingernails. "It was my father's," he lied, the words escaping before he could stop them. His actual father had vanished long before Mason had formed any memories of him, but the lie felt better than admitting he'd found the blazer in a bin meant for people exactly like him, the discarded and forgotten. For 3 heartbeats, silence claimed the path. Then Brittany's perfectly glossed lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, your daddy must have been really fat, huh? Or are you just super skinny because you don't eat?" The words struck with precision, targeting Mason's deepest insecurities about his slight frame. At 12, he was small for his age, malnutrition having stunted the growth spurt his classmates had experienced before he'd left school. "Leave him alone!" A voice suddenly cut through the crowd. It belonged to a girl with auburn hair cascading over a black and white checkered shirt. Mason hadn't noticed her before, Emma Davidson, who stood slightly apart from Brittany's inner circle. "What's wrong with you people?" Brittany rolled her eyes. "Relax, Emma. We're just having fun." "With a little kid," Yeah, super brave. Emma stepped forward, positioning herself between Mason and the others. You want to pick on someone, try someone your own size. The confrontation might have escalated further, if not for the sudden appearance of a park maintenance worker driving a small utility cart along the path. The gathering crowd dispersed, teenagers slipping away with the practiced nonchalance of those accustomed to avoiding adult scrutiny. Mason seized the moment to flee, darting down a side path and finding refuge behind the park's maintenance shed. There, hidden from sight, he withdrew a small notebook from inside his jacket. The notebook, with its water-damaged cover and pencil attached by a frayed string, contained the sum total of Mason's private thoughts over the past months. October 12th, 2024. God, are you still there? Mum always said you watched over the sparrows, and they had even less than we did. I don't know if you're listening, but I'm trying to be brave like she taught me. Today they laughed at my coat. I know it looks bad, but it keeps me warm at night when the shelter is full. I don't want to hate them for laughing. That would make me feel worse. Maybe they just don't understand what it's like to have nothing. I forgive them, even the mean blonde girl. If you're listening, please help me stay strong for 7 more days until I can check if Mr. Patterson still has that dishwashing job available. And thank you for this coat. Even with the stains, it's the best thing I have. Mason closed the notebook, carefully tucking it back into his inner pocket. The simple act of writing his thoughts, framing them as prayers the way his mother had taught him, provided a small measure of comfort. He waited another 12 minutes before venturing out again, hoping the park had emptied of his tormentors. But as he rounded the corner of the maintenance shed, he came face to face with Brittany. Mason instinctively backed away, his shoulders hunching as he prepared for another barrage of mockery. "Hey," she said, her voice lacking its earlier edge. "I was looking for you." Mason remained silent, wary of whatever new cruelty this might presage. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Brittany continued, surprising him. "What I said before, it wasn't cool." Mason studied her face, searching for signs of insincerity. "Why are you really here?" Brittany sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to another. "Emma wouldn't shut up about what a horrible person I am. And she's right. I was showing off for my friends and—" She paused, seeming to struggle with something internal. "And I know better. My mom would kill me if she knew I was bullying some kid." "I'm not some kid," Mason said quietly. "I'm 12. A smile flickered across Brittany's face. "Yeah, okay. You're 12. I'm 16, and I was being a jerk." The unexpected apology left Mason unsure how to respond. In his experience, people who hurt you rarely acknowledged it, let alone sought you out to make amends. "It's okay," he finally said, though they both knew it wasn't. "No, it's not," Brittany insisted. "Look, we're organizing this community thing in the park on Saturday. It's for my school's community service requirement. We're collecting donations for the youth shelter downtown. Maybe you could come. There'll be food and stuff." The irony that she was inviting him to a charity event that might benefit kids like him wasn't lost on Mason, but he nodded anyway. "Maybe. Cool. I'm Brittany, by the way." "Mason." "Mason," she repeated as if testing the name. "We'll see you around, Mason." He watched her walk away, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. The encounter left him with a strange feeling, not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. 3 days later, Mason found himself drawn back to the park. He'd spent the morning helping Mr. Finch, the elderly newspaper vendor, organize his stand in exchange for a half-eaten sandwich and 75 cents. The coins jingled in his pocket as he approached the area where preparations for the community event were underway. From a distance, he observed Brittany, Emma, and several other teenagers attempting to set up tables and tents. Their efforts were hampered by a brisk October wind that kept collapsing their canopy tents and blowing away their flyers. "You need to secure the corners first," Mason said before he could stop himself. 7 pairs of eyes turned to him, and he immediately regretted speaking up. "Mason!" Brittany's recognition seemed genuine. You came. I was just passing by, he clarified, not wanting to admit he'd deliberately sought them out. Well, you're just in time. This stupid tent is impossible. Mason approached cautiously. You need rocks for the corners, heavy ones. The ground's too hard for those small stakes. Emma raised an eyebrow. How do you know so much about tents? Mason shrugged. I read a lot. He didn't mention the 3 weeks he'd spent in a makeshift tent city under the Harrison Street Bridge before police had cleared it out. There are good rocks by the duck pond, I can show you. For the next 2 hours, Mason found himself integrated into their preparations. His practical knowledge, born of necessity rather than choice, proved invaluable as they secured tents, arranged tables, and created signs that wouldn't blow away with the first gust of wind. You're pretty good at this stuff, Zoe admitted grudgingly, the girl who had mocked his jacket days earlier now working alongside him to organize donation boxes. Thanks, Mason replied, accepting the small olive branch for what it was. As the afternoon progressed, more volunteers arrived. Mason instinctively retreated to the periphery, his comfort with the small group not extending to the larger crowd. He found a quiet spot behind one of the tents, where he pulled out his notebook again. October 15th, 2024. God, something weird happened today. The girl who made fun of me apologized. Then I helped them set up for some charity event. They don't know I'm exactly the kind of kid their charity is supposed to help. Should I tell them? I'm scared they'll look at me differently if they know. Right now, they're treating me like I'm normal. It feels good to be normal for a little while. Thank you for this strange day. Mason didn't notice Emma approaching until her shadow fell across his page. He snapped the notebook shut, but not before she glimpsed his writing. Is that a journal? She asked, sitting down beside him without waiting for an invitation. Sort of, Mason admitted. Just thoughts and stuff. Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense. I tried keeping a journal once, wrote in it for 3 days before I got bored. She studied him with curious eyes. You're not like other 12-year-olds I've met. I get that a lot. Where do you go to school? The question sent a jolt of panic through Mason. I'm homeschooled, he lied, the falsehood becoming easier with practice. Emma looked like she might press further, but instead she said, We're getting pizza delivered. You should stay. The mention of food made Mason's stomach clench painfully. He'd rationed Mr. Finch's sandwich carefully, but it had been gone by noon. Yeah, okay, he agreed, trying to sound casual. The pizza arrived, 7 large boxes creating a temporary tower on the main table. Mason watched as teenagers descended upon them, grabbing slices with the casual entitlement of those who had never wondered where their next meal would come from. Here, Brittany appeared at his side, holding a paper plate with 2 slices. I saved you some before the vultures ate it all. Mason accepted the plate, forcing himself to eat slowly, despite the hunger gnawing at his insides. Across the gathering, he noticed a man setting up audio equipment, speakers and a microphone stand. What's that for? He asked between careful bites. Oh, that's part of the program, Brittany explained. Tomorrow's the actual event. We're going to have speeches, music, testimonials from kids who've been helped by the youth center. That kind of thing. Mason nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Do you need help with the sound system? I'm pretty good with that stuff. Another lie, but one he could probably fake his way through after spending countless hours watching the janitor at his old school set up for assemblies. That would be amazing, Brittany said. The guy who was supposed to run it cancelled this morning. By the time darkness fell, Mason had secured himself a crucial role in the next day's proceedings. More importantly, he had secured promises of more food and $12 for his help. Enough for a cheap motel room if the temperature dropped too low for another night in his hidden spot under the park bridge. The following morning dawned clear and cool. Mason arrived early, having spent the night on a bench 2 blocks away after a police patrol had disrupted his usual sleeping spot. Despite his exhaustion, he threw himself into the final preparations, helping to arrange chairs, test the microphone, and distribute flyers to early arrivals. By noon, the park area had transformed. Hundreds of people milled about, families with children, elderly couples, teenagers in school sweatshirts. Donation boxes overflowed with canned goods, clothing, and toiletries. The air smelled of popcorn and cotton candy from a small concession stand. Mason observed it all from his position near the sound equipment. From here, he could see Brittany, Emma, Zoe, and Vanessa greeting attendees with practiced smiles. They wore matching T-shirts over their regular clothes, identifying them as event organizers. Mason found himself wondering what it would be like to belong so effortlessly to something. "You must be Mason," a woman's voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find himself facing an elegant woman in her 40s. "I'm Dr. Rachel Coleman, Brittany's mom. She tells me you've been a tremendous help." Mason straightened, suddenly conscious of his dirty jeans and the stained blazer he still wore. "Yes, ma'am. She also mentioned you're good with the sound system," Dr. Coleman continued. "We're about to start the program. Are you ready?" Mason nodded, hoping his limited knowledge would be sufficient. "Ready." The program began with Dr. Coleman welcoming the crowd. Mason adjusted volumes and cued background music as various speakers took the stage. He watched as teenagers shared statistics about youth homelessness, as the director of the shelter described their work, as a former resident spoke about how the center had changed her life. Throughout it all, Mason remained hidden behind the equipment, invisible yet essential, exactly as he had been for 313 days. Then disaster struck. As Brittany approached the microphone to introduce the next speaker, a gust of wind scattered her note cards across the stage. She froze, panic evident on her face as she stared out at the expectant crowd. Mason watched her falter, saw her lips trembling as seconds stretched into uncomfortable silence. Without thinking, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his notebook. Tearing out a page, he scribbled a few words and rushed to hand it to her. Brittany accepted the note with visible relief, then frowned slightly as she read his hastily written suggestion. "Tell them about me." She looked at him questioningly, but Mason had already retreated back to his equipment. After a moment's hesitation, Brittany leaned into the microphone. "I'd like to tell you about someone I met this week," she began, her voice gaining strength. "A 12-year-old boy named Mason, who taught me an important lesson about judging others." Mason froze as she continued, describing their first encounter without sparing herself in the retelling. She spoke of her cruelty, her friend's laughter, and Mason's quiet dignity. By the time she finished that part of the story, Mason noticed several people in the audience dabbing at their eyes. "But that's not the end of the story," Brittany continued. "Mason came back. Instead of hating us, he helped us. He knew exactly how to set up these tents, how to secure things against the wind, how to make this whole event work. And I realized something. He knows these things because he's experienced things I can't imagine." Mason's heart pounded. She knew. Somehow she had figured out his secret. "I found this," Brittany said, holding up a small notebook that made Mason's blood run cold. His notebook, which must have fallen from his jacket during his rush to help her. "I only read one page, and I'm going to return it. But with Mason's permission, I'd like to read just one small part." She looked directly at him, a question in her eyes. After a moment's hesitation, Mason nodded slightly. Brittany opened the notebook to a marked page and began to read. "God, are you still there? Mom always said you watched over the sparrows, and they had even less than we did. I don't know if you're listening, but I'm trying to be brave like she taught me. Today they laughed at my coat. I know it looks bad, but it keeps me warm at night when the shelter is full. I don't want to hate them for laughing. That would make me feel worse. Maybe they just don't understand what it's like to have nothing. I forgive them, even the mean blonde girl." A hush fell over the crowd. Mason felt exposed, his private thoughts broadcast to hundreds of strangers. Yet alongside the vulnerability came something unexpected, a sense of release, as if a burden he'd carried for 313 days was finally being shared. "Mason forgave me," Brittany said, her voice thick with emotion. When he had every right to hate me, he chose forgiveness instead. And he did more than that. He came back to help us with this event for the youth shelter. An event that, as I realized too late, is meant to help kids exactly like him. The crowd's collective gasp was audible. All eyes turned toward Mason, who stood frozen beside the sound equipment, his oversized blazer suddenly feeling like insufficient armor against their scrutiny. "Mason doesn't have a home," Brittany continued, tears now streaming freely down her face. "He's been living on the streets, sleeping under a bridge in this very park, the same park where I humiliated him for wearing a coat that probably keeps him alive at night. And still he forgave me. Still he came to help." Mason felt his own eyes burning. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He'd survived by being invisible, by keeping his secrets close. Now hundreds of people were looking at him with pity, with shock, with tears in their eyes. "Mason," Brittany said, turning to face him directly, "would you come up here? Please." Every instinct told him to run, to disappear into the crowd and never look back. But something stronger than instinct, something his mother would have called faith, propelled him forward. On shaking legs, he made his way to the stage, each step feeling like it covered an impossible distance. When he reached Brittany, she handed him the microphone. Mason stared at it, then at the sea of faces before him. For 313 days, no one had really seen him. Now, everyone was looking. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice barely a whisper that the microphone amplified across the park. "I'm just trying to survive until things get better." A woman in the front row openly sobbed. A man beside her wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "My mum died last year," Mason continued, the words coming easier now. "She always told me that when things seem darkest, that's when you need to be kindest, because everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I wrote that prayer because I didn't want to become bitter. My mom said bitterness is a poison you drink yourself, hoping it will hurt someone else. So I forgave Brittany and her friends, not for them, but for me." Mason's simple words hung in the air. In the silence that followed, a single person began to clap. Then another joined, and another, until the entire gathering was on their feet, applauding not just his words, but his resilience, his forgiveness, his humanity. Dr. Coleman stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed the purpose of today's event in its purest form. This is why we're here, to recognize that any one of us could be in Mason's position and that all of us have the responsibility to help." Means what happened next was something Mason would struggle to describe in his notebook that evening. People came forward, dozens, then hundreds, placing donations in the collection boxes. Others approached him directly, pressing money into his hands despite his protests. A couple who ran a local bed and breakfast offered him a room for as long as you need. The director of the youth shelter promised to help him re-enter school and find permanent housing. But most meaningful of all was when Emma, Zoe, and Vanessa joined Brittany on stage, each offering their own apologies. Vanessa, who had mocked his dirty face, now had mascara streaming down her cheeks. Zoe, who had laughed at his jacket, now offered him her brother's outgrown clothes. Emma, who had defended him from the start, simply hugged him, whispering, "You're the bravest person I've ever met," into his ear. As the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, Mason found himself sitting on a park bench beside Brittany and her mother. His notebook was back in his pocket, along with more money than he had seen in months. More importantly, he had something he'd lost 313 days ago: hope. "What happens now?" he asked, directing the question at no one in particular. Dr. Coleman smiled gently. "Now you come home with us, just for tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk to the youth services people who are already looking for you. We'll make sure you're safe, Mason." "Why?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Why would you help me?" Brittany answered, her usual confidence replaced by genuine humility. "Because you helped me first. Your forgiveness, it changed something in me. I can't explain it. Mason nodded, understanding more than she realized. His mother had called it grace, the unearned gift that transforms both giver and receiver. As they walked together toward the Coleman's car, Mason felt the weight of his oversized blazer, his dignity coat, differently now. It was no longer a shield against the world, but a reminder of where he'd been. And perhaps, someday soon, he would outgrow it, not because he'd found a better coat, but because he himself had grown. The next morning, Mason sat in Dr. Coleman's kitchen, wearing clean clothes that actually fit. His dignity coat hung in the guest room closet, not discarded, but preserved as a testament. Social services had been contacted, a caseworker was coming that afternoon, and the wheels of a system that had failed him once were being given a chance to work properly this time. As Mason sipped hot chocolate, his third cup since waking, he opened his notebook one more time. October 17th, 2024. God, I think you were listening after all. Yesterday, everything changed because of a simple prayer I wrote when I thought no one cared. I still miss Mom every minute of every day, but for the first time since she left, I don't feel completely alone. I don't know what happens next, but I'm not as scared as I was 314 days ago. Thank you for Brittany, even though she started as an enemy. Thank you for Emma, who stood up for a stranger. Thank you for Dr. Coleman, and all the people who saw me yesterday, really saw me, maybe for the first time ever. Most of all, thank you for Mom, who taught me that forgiveness sets both people free. I think I understand that now. Mason closed the notebook, not with finality, but with the gentle awareness that this entry marked not an ending, but a beginning. Outside the kitchen window, maple leaves danced in the autumn breeze. Their brilliant colors, a reminder that even in seasons of letting go, beauty remains. And sometimes in the most unexpected places, like an oversized, stained blazer or a simple prayer written in a water-damaged notebook, grace waits to be discovered.